is Emma, and today I will be presenting on how excessive screen time and technology impact student performance. It's just an outline for today. We're going to start off with a brief introduction to my topic, followed by a literature review of the articles that I used. Then we will go step by step into a detailed intervention strategy to address the problem. Afterwards, a quick reflection, a conclusion, and then my references. Alrighty. So as previously mentioned, my topic is how excessive screen time and technology impact student performance. So how using your phones or other technological devices too much can hurt how you perform academically. And I do see this problem, it's very prevalent in my current life for just my day-to-day career. I am a teacher, and no matter what grade level I'm teaching, or whether it's me teaching or somebody else, students are constantly on their phone. I know myself, during COVID-19, during its peak, I was just drawn to my phone more. There was nothing really for me to do. Everything was shut down, so I just went on my phone. And if it wasn't my phone, then it was my laptop. And if it wasn't my laptop, then I was making a TikTok or on Instagram or whatever it may be. But students are just very, very attached and even borderline addicted to their phones, and this is greatly hurting their performance. Many of my students, whether it's a direct correlation to this or not, are performing several grade levels behind, and it's very difficult to try and break that cell phone, non-cell phone interaction. So to have students, even just to surrender their phones in general, is a very, very difficult thing to do in my line of work. And a lot of students, whether this was heightened because of COVID, just struggle to do any work that's not on a laptop. Any work that's not online is also a persistent challenge. I did have a student last year who told me that he hasn't wrote with pen and paper since the 8th grade, and he was a junior in high school. So something has definitely got to change if we want to see an increase in overall performance and just the bettering of our adolescent students before it's ultimately too late to really make any change. Okay, so the first article that I looked at focused more on the parental and educator perspectives of how too much technological use and too much screen time is hurting academic performance, how it's deterring student attention, and how it can also result in addictive behaviors and just interfere with social interactions and other problems that may arise. So just some main findings that I thought were significant throughout the article. The overall idea of academic performance worsening was supported. So the author did find that heavy media multitasking, or just bouncing back and forth between different modes of technology all throughout the classroom, does result in lower academic performance. This does also result in a lower executive test functioning. Students are not performing to their best ability, and they're acting more impulsively. So also within that, using too much media and trying to multitask that media is also showing more addictive behaviors in these children. And within that addictive behavior, it's more so feeding that need for constant gratification. And we're going to go over that at a later time. Especially other articles do greatly support and give more evidence into that need for gratification. And that does furthermore feed into one of the hierarching themes of my intervention. They also found that within this classroom setting, and mind you, this is all within an elementary classroom, so these are very, very young children. While technology was present, they were not socializing as much. So relationships within their classmates and their peers were greatly decreasing, and so were just interacting with people in general. While that was decreasing, it was still a positive experience because, you know, kids just like to talk and hang out, so there's no bad blood with them. But it is something that if it persists for a prolonged period of time, it could be very detrimental to their development further on. Okay, so the second review, or the second article that I examined focuses more on an online classroom setup. So how, when compared to in-person learning, how do the effects of online learning differ post-pandemic? So during COVID-19, that was a very swift and brief transition from in-person to online learning. And a lot of people, students and educators, just struggled because this was all brand new. But it was something that needed to be done in order to continue the learning process, because learning cannot remain stagnant for that long of a period of time. It'll just, everything will collapse essentially. So some of the main findings, when it does compare the two, students do report that when they are in a traditional in-person setting, in that in-person learning environment, they are able to retain more information. So they're getting a better and a deeper understanding of what the teacher or the professor is trying to convey. However, online learning is not as positive. So a lot of the students who were in the online learning cohort did report some more negative side effects and just some more negative feelings compared to being in the classroom. So online learners reported feeling more isolated and just having an overall lack of motivation. So having no motivation to complete your work is obviously going to impact your performance because you're not going to turn anything in. The less work you turn in, the more your grade drops, and eventually you fail. And that is not great for your GPA or just your overall school progress in a whole. Okay, while online learning did report some negative initial feelings, there was a little bit of an upside. So a small pro that some of the students reported was that it was more flexible and convenient compared to just sitting in a classroom. So whatever the circumstance may be, whether they had something going on in their own personal life, they just had more time to do what they needed to do and not be under the pressure, not be on that strict, like, okay, you have 50, 50, 50, 50, 50-minute structure, whatever it may be. It was just more at their own pace. So while that was a small pro, the cons definitely outweigh the pros for online learning, as students reported that there were more distractions and they turned in less homework. So that does feed into the motivation aspect. If you're not motivated, you're not going to submit your things. And also students and teachers reported that there is less interactivity. This more so speaks to having breakout rooms. So whether you had a post-class meeting on Teams, on Zoom, whatever it may be, students were kind of just signing off. They're like, I don't really want to be here. I don't have to do this because this is not a real classroom. So overall, not meeting with your peers and your instructors does impact your performance because you are not receiving the full academic material. And you're also not performing at your best if you are not feeling engaged with the class. Oh, and also online learning did show that it had more of a higher percentage of test scores. So students statistically were performing better during online classes for exams, but that is because the students admitted to cheating. So cheating, obviously, if you are not in a real in-person classroom, you could just cheat whenever you want. And it's a lot harder for teachers to see that, but if you're in an in-person classroom, you can't just whip out your notebook and look through your notes. So a lot of the students on the online classes were performing or scoring better just because they admitted to watching the lecture videos while taking the exams or the quizzes or whatever assessment material was being delivered. Okay, third article focuses more on the neuroscience aspect of learning. So how do we think and how do we learn? So within the article, in summary, it describes how synaptic plasticity is foundational for learning, and it compares two different educational pedagogies. So it really focuses and emphasizes the differences between active learning and direct instruction. So while it compares the two, it also discusses their benefits. So I made a little table just to kind of contrast the two. So we're going to begin with direct instruction. So direct instruction within this study was proven to be not as beneficial compared to active learning. So direct instruction is more so lecture based. So it's kind of just the teacher yap, 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 talking, 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 and then give you instructions or directions to complete your work. And it's kind of teacher delivers the knowledge, students do the work. There's no real mind stimulation or engagement within teacher-student or student and student. However, on the contrary, active learning is more engaging. So within active learning, you are actively trying to absorb new knowledge. You're trying to maintain new material. And this is kind of broken down into two main parts. So you have in-class time and pre-class time. So that pre-class preparation, that would be if you were assigned a chapter to read at home, or if you had some homework, or if I would assign a problem and say do questions 1 through 5, and we'll discuss them tomorrow. And then tomorrow comes, you have your in-class time, and that is when you, as a student, review with your entire class, including the teacher. You go over the answers and you solve the problems together. So active learning has both the individual element and the interactive element, if you will, just furthermore absorbing and developing a deeper understanding of that knowledge. So learning or understanding how we learn and what is more beneficial to learning could furthermore strengthen the intervention to seeing how can we get students more engaged and how can this engagement improve academic performance. Okay. Fourth article, it explored how different mobile devices distract high school students. So this is feeding into how different devices ultimately impact the attention of high school students. And as a result, when they were looking at these students, 80% of them reported being on task regularly. However, while they reported being on task regularly, they did admit to either occasionally, just once in a while, or every single day, every single period, going off task online, doing something else that they're not supposed to do. So the two highest ones, a lot of students reported that while the teacher was teaching and while instruction was going on, they were either just emailing each other or checking their email or surfing the web. So going on some sort of tab on the internet and just looking things up because they feel like it. A lot of students also reported just going on social media or using some sort of instant messaging app and just playing games. So I know myself, I do fall into the playing games category. I was in college playing a lot of games if I was not engaged with the material, and that just furthermore feeds to the fact that engagement is key. Students will learn more the more that they are engaged, and if they are disconnected, they are not going to do that work. And students also felt that when you brought your own device to the classroom, it was more of a distraction when they were doing solo work or if they were working in a group with their peers. So just a group of students working together, they felt as though they were more prone to just going on their phone or just being off task online, opposed to having the teacher give a lecture. So as long as the teacher was engaging in the lecture, or if students were presenting, the rest of the class was focused as they were trying to absorb the information. But when it was time for them to be by themselves or work in a small group with their peers, they found that more challenging as their attention was more easily distracted. Okay, last two articles. I'm going to try to keep this really short. So the first one was more how screen time affects neuroplasticity and just the overall effects mentally and physically of screen addiction. So we're going to start just very quickly with this one. people have found that when your phone gives a notification, when you hear that ding, or if it's your laptop, any sort of notification does release dopamine. And dopamine is that happy chemical. And some people are just so addicted just to their phones that they start to hear phantom pings, which still releases dopamine. And if you think about it, it's almost, I don't want to say it's classical conditioning, but it does remind me a little bit of Pavlov's experiment. Um, but one of the main things was that too much screen time can affect sleep. And not even just too much, but just screen time before bed, period, will impact your sleep. So CWIR did find that more than 50% of Americans have chronic sleep deprivation. Because when you look at your phone before bed, that blue light does affect your pineal gland, which produces melatonin, and that's our sleep hormone. So the more that you go on your phone before you go to bed, you're not going to get great quality of sleep, and it's going to be very difficult to really fall into that deep REM. But the main takeaway, and this I think is just one of the biggest key points of the overall review, is that people are not addicted to the technology rather than the content provided by the technology. So people just have a need for gratification. They need to feel gratified. So it's not so much that people are addicted to the phone, it's what can the phone provide? What can the phone offer? That is what they are addicted to, and missing that feeds into my next article. So the article on the right, missing what people are experiencing, is FOMO. So FOMO stands for fear of missing out. It's a very real phenomenon in young adults and adolescents, but it does tie into problematic smartphone use. So how do these two things impact long-term online learning? How do they feed into social anxiety and just impact student performance? So problematic smartphone use, PSU, it's a little bit higher in adults and adolescents, but they still hurt learning. They are still very detrimental to student performance. And just trying to circle and connect all of the ties in this article, the problematic smartphone use, using your phone too much can heighten or increase your social anxiety, which makes you kind of reclude yourself. And when you reclude yourself, it is a part of human nature to know and want to know how people are doing. We're just naturally nosy. So using your phone too much makes you more anxious to where you can't interact with people, but you still want to know what's going on because you do not want to miss out. So too much phone use, too much screen time makes you more anxious, which also heightens your FOMO. And all of those things can just make your academic performance go from here all the way down to here, and it can tank it very quickly. Okay, so we are done with the literature review aspect. We are now going to focus more on the intervention. So what are the goals? What are the strategies? And how can we improve this cognitive challenge? So the overall goals and objectives, the main thing that I want to see is an increase in academic performance. So it would be completely unrealistic if I were to sit here and say, yep, I expect to see 100% increase, 100% change. That's not going to happen. Whether it just be some internal or external factor, something is going to skew that, and not every student is the same. Some students are going to react differently opposed to other students. So the main goal is to see an increase in academic performance, but the overall objective, you want to see an increase in grades, you want to see more engagement, and just overall better mental health. If you're feeling better, you're going to perform better, and that's really what's most important for my students. So two main goals that I really want to focus on within this intervention. First, a minimum of 50%. So minimum, at least half of the class is reported have seeing a positive change in their behavior towards learning. So having more of an open mind and mindset when it comes to learning new things. Because a lot of learning doesn't have to be bad. A lot of students go, oh man, school, but learning can be fun. So just shifting that mindset and that attitude towards learning at least half of the class. And then a minimum, we're going to increase it to 60% of students not going on their phones during class. So no students scrolling through Instagram, no students texting, nothing. And I really think that if we can get at least 60% of the class from the beginning of the year to the end of the year not on their phones, I think that will greatly increase their chances of performing at a higher academic standard. Target population, just because I am a high school teacher, I'm going to focus more on high school students. So before high school, I was teaching just for a few months. I started off as a middle school teacher, and while it could be more beneficial to start at a younger age, there are more technological dependencies seen in high school students. And if we are able to kind of stop those disruptions of learning during this core developmental period, I think that could be extremely beneficial for them long term post high school. So whether they go into college or they work, or even when they reach their 40s and 50s, I think that this could be a very strong impact for students. Okay, methods and materials. So you need, first and foremost, you have to do some research or just develop an understanding on how excessive technology use is good or bad. So what are some of the stats? What is current research saying about staring at a screen for too long? How does that impact students? Followed by learning about child development. So how do children develop? How do their minds develop when influenced by A, B, and C? And what are different modes of instruction, such as direct instruction or active learning? What are different modes of instruction that best service students? How do students learn more? So once you do that, once you get fully educated on those few things, another key material is this platform called GoGuardian. So GoGuardian, if you've never heard of it, it is a software that allows you to block any website of your choosing to ever be opened, ever. My current school does not have this. My previous school did, and it was a real game changer. I mean, students were just on it like all the time. I do not think it's free, but it is definitely something to consider, and it is a very large part of my intervention strategy. Fourth, teachers will need to make their own syllabi and evaluation sheets to kind of keep track of student progress. You'll need a phone cubby or a designated charging station. All right, so within my implementation, there are 9 key steps that we are going to focus on. So the first 3, one happens before the school year, one happens during the summer, and then the rest is just during the school year. So before the school year even starts, the teacher needs to set clear classroom rules and boundaries along with consequences. So students need to be held accountable for their actions. If they are not feeling the heat, they're going to keep doing the same things because they know that they can get away with it. So before anything even happens, teacher needs to set the rules, consequences, print it out. So summer session, so teachers do come in for the first 2.5 weeks of summer. So starting August 1st all the way to the first day of school, teachers come in. We call it professional development week. During that time, teacher or whoever is teaching, they can work with the IT department to install GoGuardian and give them a list of desired websites to block. This could include Instagram, TikTok. I've seen my students go on Snapchat somehow on their laptops. If you really want, YouTube, I know our school does, somehow they have parts of YouTube blocked so students can't listen to music, but anything that the teacher desires to block, they can. First day of school, print out a syllabi or print out a syllabus with all of those rules and the boundaries and have your parents sign it. That way, students and the parents will know, okay, if my child is caught doing X, Y, or Z, they will receive this punishment, whether it be a detention or an out-of-school suspension, whatever it may be, depending on the severity and how frequent it is. Okay, so when students walk into the classroom, the teacher will then instruct the students to surrender their phones. So students will not have their phones on their person. It's going to go in one of two spots. It can go in a phone cubby, which my school used to do, like the clear shoe racks and hang them on the door. That way students who did have that smartphone addiction were able to still see their phones because the slots were clear, and just being able to see their phone did relieve some anxiety and just overall attachment from their phone. So you could put it in the cubby, or if the school decides to have a designated charging station, because a lot of students will try to hit me with the, oh, well, I need to charge my phone. Well, you can't have your phone. You're not supposed to have your phone, but you do have your phone because you don't turn it in. So that way, students, if they're charging their phones, they won't be able to just go on their phone or make up a new excuse to have access to their phone. So once they go in there, there's no more access to the phone till the end of the class period. So students will continue with the class, the teacher will continue to teach, but at the end of the class, you will get rewarded. So this does tie into that need for gratification, and it's kind of a little bit like positive reinforcement. So at the end of the class, for the last 5 minutes of class, students can choose between if they want to have 5 minutes of screen time or if they want to go play outside. So outside play does tie into one of the cognitive principles that we will be discussing on the following slides, but outside, just being outside or outside learning has so many crucial benefits. And it's a shame that we just can't always have class outside, even though there may be inclement weather, but students will be able to get rewarded. Then also 1 day a week, there should be outdoor instruction, just because of all of the benefits and everything. While the week goes on, teachers will have hands-on engagement and learning activities while having or exercising the two different modes of instruction. So they can use active learning, direct instruction, and then we will also go over this on the following slides, but students and teachers will do some form of evaluation at the end of each quarter. So both the evaluations will cover how or if teachers and students are seeing any progress in their academic performance whatsoever and their behaviors to learning. And then at the end of each quarter, at the end of each term, if required by the school, the teacher can report the progress to the principal, or they can report the progress to the families, which teachers should already be engaged with the parents or the guardians of the students, and also just give them a shout out like, hey, by the way, your child just increased from a 78% to an 86% this quarter, and he's engaging more. So that is just the general, how can we implement a really, even though it's a little bit broad, but how can we implement an effective strategy in hopes to increase academic performance? All right, so the main guiding principle was Vygotsky's sociocultural theory. So this was developed in the 1930s, but it really emphasized that individual learning happens in a social context. So you need to have you need to have social interactions, and you need to socialize, more specifically through play. So just playing outside or playing with one another, children are able to shape and interpret the world more. And play, the idea of play, ultimately shapes an individual's way of thinking. And more so within his sociocultural theory, he really embraced this idea of bottom-up teaching, where you start from the bottom and you work your way up, just in a lack of better words, but teachers really pay close attention to what students are learning and find different modes or means on how to deliver those concepts. Assessment and evaluation. As previously mentioned, there's going to be two forms of evaluation. So the students are going to be evaluating themselves, and the teacher is going to keep some form of documentation to also evaluate the students. So at the end of each quarter, teachers are going to create scaling questions. It's just 0 to 10. Students can write what they think. So it could be students' grades have improved, students' grades have worsened, da 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 da. But just having that documentation makes it easier for teachers to really monitor the progress and see, is this working? Is their academic performance increasing? Is it decreasing? Why? And within that, you can even find more intermediate levels of intervention that could hopefully propose a better change. So students will take a similar questionnaire, but it's going to be on paper. Furthermore, just kind of emphasizing, okay, let's not be on our laptops the entire time. Let's try and do more pen and paper learning. So it's kind of just avoiding that technological dependency. Not that you're never allowed to use a laptop, but it should not be your only means of learning. It should not be the only mode of instruction. But the survey or the questionnaire that the students take, if they want it to be anonymous, they can. Hopefully that'll help to alleviate some of the anxiety that students may be feeling if they don't want their scores to be a direct reflection of them. Just a lot of people might get that social anxiety, and it might furthermore worsen their performance. So that way, just having the teacher evaluation and just seeing just student evaluations, it might help to strengthen or change the intervention. So expected outcome, just overall, first and foremost, you want to see academic performance improve. How can it improve? You need to have less technically or technology dependent learning. So as I said before, the technology should not be the only way of learning the entire class period. So students should not be heavily dependent on taking notes on their laptop for 50 minutes, or if you do an 80-minute class period, that's way too long. Information needs to be chunked more, and it also needs to be hands-on, more pen and paper. That way, even though it's not right before bed, just blue light in general just is not good for you. With the improved academic performance, you want to see better attitudes towards learning and more student engagement. So you want to see the attention aspect improve as well. Having students become more engaged and I don't want to say find learning more fun, but be so engaged with their work that they don't feel the need to be gratified or just check social media or go on their laptop or be distracted by something else because it's boring to them. And lastly, with academic performance, grades will improve if smartphone addiction decreases. So if we could decrease the overall attachment to phones or to these mobile devices, I do think that it will improve student performance. Okay, reflection. In order for this to work, students must be held accountable. It's going to take a long time. This is not change that happens overnight. I'm not an addictions specialist or expert, but things take time. Any growth takes time, and growth is not linear. So one quarter students may be doing exceptionally well, and then they might just drop. And that could just be, as previously mentioned, just a mix of internal, external factors. And within my topic, since my topic's so broad, it could open up the door to new research possibilities. So going back to that article on having students that reported surfing the web and going and checking their emails with all the percentages, in that article, it talked about how females are more prone to checking social media significantly more than male students, and how the male students play games more on their laptop significantly more than the female students. So you could even furthermore examine just within that, how does excessive technology use impact male and female students? How does it impact the mental health? More studies should be drawn and investigated just on how too much phone time, too much screen time is hurting our youth. Lastly, technology is not all harmful. There's a lot of upsides to using technology, but using it too much is bad. So yes, it's more convenient. Yes, it's more flexible. And yes, it does help students who have anxiety kind of avoid that general anxiety they may have, whether they're presenting or learning or interacting in an in-person classroom. But it's hurting them developmentally and academically. So it's just a little bit too much usage is bad, essentially. And it's just doing more harm than good. Okay, so as a conclusion, after reviewing all of the articles furthermore prove my topic that long-term usage of these devices affect students' dependence, how they socialize, how they think, and their overall behavioral patterns. And while there are some benefits to using technology, too much of it can include or enhance smartphone addiction, this fear of missing out with everything around us, and just lower overall academic performance. And finally, there should be more research conducted examining the correlation between screen time and overall student performance. So while it does really focus on this negative correlation, I do think that with time and with more research, we could find a better resolution to just saving the education system, to fixing how students think, how they learn, how can we improve that, how can we get these grades up and get students back to where they need to be. All right, so that does conclude my literature review, my presentation for today. These are my references, and thank you so much for listening.